Katradam, Kassadar, have mercy upon us, the meager and scum. You are to us as the grand behemoths to the north are to the smallest of beetles. Beyond comprehension your power. Forgive us our transgressions, and grant us pardon from your wrath. We pray to you that you do not rain lead upon us as you did to our forefathers, but by your will alone will end on dust or metal. Katra kosul, tradam rishkas mark sagul. Hymn 169, Litany to the Mountain, the Scripts of Ora. After some leisurely scrounging, you collected a sizable stack of random stories. From the first book that you pick up, you feel a strange burning sensation coming from the pages, almost as though you can feel its hate radiating from the words within. The title of this book: From the Mountain, Rage, Unfathomable Rage. The earth is, to those still on its surface, constant. Not a force of nature, but what nature is built upon. The flashes of life see the earth as a board on which they play their lives. They see it with no greater purpose than to hold them. But just below the surface lay Satyr, the one of ash, lead, and fire. The thing of 10,000 flames. Before the age of the river, there was Satyr and Malfta, the one of the beyond. They engaged in dances of incredibility and incomprehensibility. However, Malfta sought for greater things. Malfta pulled that which did not exist from the beyond and made it exist, whilst Satyr danced on its own. Malfta refused to continue its eternal dance with Satyr, instead singing to the Burning One as it brought forth that which does not exist. Malfta began to sing to what it pulled from the beyond instead of Satyr, causing a new flame to burn within it. The flame of jealousy and loneliness. And in retaliation, Satyr attacked existence, burning it and encasing it in lead and casting it aside. What this first existence was, none know. However, its corpse remains in the sky, which you all call the moon. With this existence destroyed, Satyr returned to Malfta, offering a dance, and in response, Malfta beckoned forth from the beyond, Rashon, dirt, mud, and stone. Malfta set Rashun between itself and Satyr, locking the molten thing away. Generations passed, and Malfta split itself into Ramses and Shalanemf, the hopeful star and the river. Time was born, and slaughtered innumerably. And all the while, Satyr lay raging, imprisoned by Rashun. However, while Malfta had considered Rashun to be an eternal blockade against the fire, this was not the case. It is true, Satyr could not break through Rashun. Instead, Rashun would make a dealing with Satyr. The deal of the mountain. Rashun and Satyr engaged in a dance of their own, which led to the birth of Taradam, the mountain. The mountain provided Satyr with a portal through which it could emerge and wreak havoc over creation. The first instance of this caused Malfta to manifest, recombining its two aspects back into a single being once again. A war of titanic powers began, with Satyr crawling from Trandam, and Malfta attempting to save what it had made. And in the end, Ra'asha'un regretted its decision to free Satyr, and helped Malfta seal Satyr once again. Back in its domain, through no choice of its own, Satyr swore to destroy all that Malfta had brought from the beyond. It swore to force Malfta to sing to it again, so that it could truly dance again. Malfta had a cosmic trial for the traitorous Ra'asha'un, a host of Lodestar. The one of light who held the stars in the sky on their shoulders found the Ra'asha'un too dangerous to be free with its power, and thus Malfta bound it so that it could not morph and move as it had before. It would take centuries for Ra'asha'un to even move the shortest of distances. Malfta siphoned power from Ra'asha'un and locked it away in Tanandam, using the power of the earth to hold the mountain together, and thus keeping the seal on Seder secure. Ra'asha'un swore vengeance against Smalfta for locking away its power, and now conspires to birth more mountains through which Seder can escape. Trandum is held in a state of dormant infancy, in eternal slumber because of Ra'asha'un's magics. When all was done, Malfta split itself once again, with Ramses joining the Lodestar in the beyond, and Salinumf beginning the cycle of death and rebirth on Ra'asha'un's surface. Trandum continued to slumber, and Ra'asha'un and Seder continued to conspire. Every moment Seder grew more powerful and more driven, slowly wearing down the power holding Trandum asleep, constantly scratching at the seal holding back Armageddon. A girl stood in a village at the foot of a mountain, playing with a doll. She played a game of make-believe where her doll was a queen with all of the food that she could ever want. A rumble ran through the ground. The girl thought her stomach had growled, but looked up when she heard some of the adults on the streets talking worriedly about something. They were looking at the mountain. Trandum, they called it. A thin stream of thick smoke had begun spilling from an area on the tip of the mountain. Another rumble shook the earth violently, causing the girl, who had just stood up, to fall over on her behind. She stared at the mountain in confusion, as did the rest of the village, which had come out of their dwellings to see what was happening. The girl's mother ran over to her and grabbed her close, whispering prayers under her breath. The elders of the town sung a hymn, the litany to the mountain, and the townsfolk joined in. The river by the village, unnoticed, seemingly swelled slightly, as though preparing for something. The villagers watched in fear and horror as a tremendous explosion caused the entire top of the mountain to explode. Enormous boulders streaked through the sky towards the village, and noxious gases began to spill like a mist down the peaks and slopes of Trandum. The villagers began running as fast as they could. Some were able to dodge the boulders, but most did not. The mountain began spilling out molten metal and rock, and a few remaining people in the village heard the tortured, hate-filled cry of anger and pain emanating from the mountain. It sounded as though the earth itself were screaming, and the fire was cackling at the demise it was causing. Lead and fire gushed from the cauldron, and from the mountain came rage. Unfathomable rage. As you pick up the next book, you can smell blood. It feels as though a dark presence emanates from the book, and a strange sense of hunger overtakes you, and the urge to hunt. The book is titled Meat Hook. The key is not to hesitate. Do it fast, hard, and vicious, or don't do it at all. It's not for their benefit. I mean, what do I care if some unlucky limp dick Larry suffers for a few hours or days before he dies? No. The reason you do it is for you. If you play the game like how I play it, you can never be quite sure of who it is you're about to get it in with. I mean, they could be a salaryman coming home from his day job who's never been in a fight in his life, or they could be some shrieking half-banshee who throws fire like fastballs and thinks your bones would make a great fuel for their blood magic. If you do it hard, it won't matter who they are or what they can do, because they'll be dead before they can show you. I've got plenty of tools to hunt with, but my favorite is the bone knife. I earned it after some punk tried to slash my belly with it, and I caved his skull in with a bar stool. Before he tried to stick it in me, he'd been bragging that it was carved from the skull of a Margorn, and blessed by a coven of death witches. I don't know if that's true, but I do know that it hasn't met anything that it couldn't cut. When I first started playing, all I had was a gun, and not a very good one. A Mossberg Patriot my dad got me when I turned 18. When I tried to hit my first target with it, I missed, and he fled. I spent 4 more weeks tracking the bastard down, and I finally killed him and went home. I found a package with 4 hand grenades in it sitting in my mailbox. I've only ever used one of them. That's a little joke, really. Whoever's running this show puts on a front of giving you equipment, info, and rewards when you do well. But anyone I've ever met who succeeded at this business has rarely ever used any of that stuff, because the best tools that you get are the ones that you're able to find on the hunts. I met a player once who told me that he'd been on over 300 hunts. We were tracking the same prey, which is rare, but not unheard of. He stole my kill by seconds. Afterwards, he bought me lunch, some sort of gesture of pity. He was an old fuck, probably in his 40s, but damn if he didn't move quick, and he ran his mouth like some sort of 14-year-old on Adderall. Talked about the places that he'd been, the people and things that he'd killed, the gear that he'd stolen, lost, and traded. Spent half of the time showing me the toy that he used to light up the prey. Looks like a laser pointer or something, except it's a beam cut a building in 2 and turned a golem into gelatin. Not for me, thanks. I found this on my 17th hunt. A man tried to kill me with it. Not even my target, just one of his guards. He came up with practically a battalion of people I had to blast through. Never been covered with that much viscera before. Most of them had paltry black guns, kind every wannabe carries that's better for looking intimidating than killing anyone with. Barely noticed them. But this fucking thing almost burnt right through my armor, and I knew I had to have it. Anyway, when I finally got to my prey, I was covered behind an overturned bookshelf, crying. Not the most self-respecting fellow. Right before I melted his head off, he whimpered something about the Black Queen. I searched his files, and lo and behold, I had found my next target. She was a tough bitch to take out, and she led me to the next target, and the next target, and the next, and so on and so forth. I mean, you've seen how it goes. Always just enough breadcrumbs to pick up the next trail. He paused to breathe and light a cigarette. The trail is what got me thinking. It was around this time that I began to realize it, to really step back and think. I'd been hunting for around 10 years at this point. It all started with the letter in the mail, just like it did for you. Who was the first poor sap that you had to kill? Did you hesitate? I doubt it. I didn't. No one that I've ever met has. Me. They had me take out this cleaning lady. Only lived a few blocks from me. Not many people can say they had their first hunt that easy. As I was cleaning up the body, I was inexperienced. I still thought I had to cover my tracks. Didn't realize just what I was getting into. Bam! Someone sees me dumping her head into a river. So that was my second hunt. Took 2 weeks to track him down. All I knew was that he had a red hat and a limp. And who was he? A psychic, of course. Something that I didn't even know existed at the time. So my third hunt was set up by just finishing the second. And so on, and so on. I spent some time, when I could, when the hunt wasn't calling me, to figure out what the whole business was. But nothing gave me any hints. The deliveries I got from whoever was running this game didn't give me any hints. Nothing I found in my research could lead me to them. Even other hunters that I only knew smoky rumors that disappeared as soon as I tried to follow them. So I stopped caring pretty soon. It didn't matter who or what was running this, as long as they let me do what I needed to do. But after these hunts, after the Queen, after the Cannibal of Desiree, after the mutineers, the itch came back. This couldn't be random killing. I was following a path, a purpose, and when I really began taking my time investigating each target thoroughly, sure, it slowed me down, reduced my efficiency, but my god, was it worth it. I became more and more convinced of that. I wasn't just leaving random bloody trails across the universe. I was traveling towards something. This isn't a game. This is destiny. I can feel it. And I've heard rumors, vague ones, worth little more than lines in a work of fiction that convince me that I'm correct. People have changed the course of history with this game. People have finished it and disappeared. People who claimed that they known people who have heard of hunters who ventured to the edges of all the universes. And that's why I hunt now. The pleasure of killing wore off a decade ago. It's the pleasure of knowledge that I seek now. Man, you'd make a great professor, I said, and I finished my coffee and left before he had the chance to start telling me about how, in fact, he actually had been in grad school before. As for me, killing still brings a whole lot of pleasure. And you're not reading this to hear about some old man's ramblings. You're looking for the thrill of spilled blood. So I'll give you my own story for you. Do you remember the half-banshee that I talked about? That was my 16th hunt. I was feeling cocky. The last one had been simple. Cut a prophet's throat while he slept. I didn't feel like taking a breather. I had already hopped across 3 different universes to find this guy. I figured it would be enough of a pain in the ass to get home no matter what I did. After killing him, I went outside. It was a calm night, the stars were out, and nobody outdoors knew their messiah was dead yet. Sometimes, more often than not I guess, the places that this game leads me to are shitholes, war zones, death cults. Chicago. This place was nice. A primitive city, surrounded by jungle and ocean in a world that hadn't discovered pollution yet. Good food, good drinks, beautiful women. I had just washed the blood out of my hair and was sitting outside smoking a cigarette. Apparently, no one in this world had heard of tobacco. I've learned to start carrying a few backup cartons whenever I travel. From far away, I heard a couple of guys talking. I couldn't hear much, so I walked a bit closer, all casual-like, and I listened in. Lame told me in Pelios that there's a guy with golden eyes who makes charms. Carry them with you, and they ward off danger. Could even get hit by a sword and it wouldn't hurt you. And what would you know about Pelios? He'd been there, back when he was a soldier, fighting against the Somi Alliance. Like it always does. It hit me like being punched in the stomach. That feeling of knowing from the top of my head all the way down to my balls that I had found my next target. Pelios. I had heard of this place while I was hunting for the Messiah. A small cluster of islands, a rich alliance of trading cities. And I imagined that I could feel my blood beginning to simmer with excitement. I checked my scanner, and sure enough, a new image was popping up. A picture of a youngish man dressed in all black robes and glittering jewels. Below it, a brief description told me that he was a soothsayer of Pelios, and not much else of anything useful, but I had my target. 2 weeks later, I was getting off a ship in a sunny port, ready to track down the man with the golden eyes. It wasn't difficult. He was a well-known guy, which made sense if even schmucks across 2,000 miles of water were talking about him. I kill people in their sleep when I have to, but I prefer my targets awake. Not enough changes when you kill a sleeping person. They bleed, they twitch, and then they just stop. It's when they're awake that you have to get to hear their moans, see them collapse, see a living thing truly transform into a sack of meat. So at noon, I went over to the stall that the man had set up to watch him. There was a massive line of people decked out in so many types of dyed clothing, feathered hats, and glittery jewels that you would have thought it was the entrance to some sort of ball. The man took his time with each one. He asked what they wanted, wrote it down carefully. They went to a small tent. He came out about 10 to 20 minutes later, each time, gave the customers what they asked for, and moved on to the next one. It was a tricky type of environment. I could have waited in line, gotten to the front, and taken him out in one strike. or tried to sneak into the tent and wait for him there, or just ran up and gutted him if I had been feeling up to it. My hand tightened around the handle of my knife as I savored the thoughts, but there were so many people around, and though the idea of having to outrun all of them did thrill me a bit, my gut said it might be a bit too much to deal with. I decided to wait. When the sun started setting, he shooed the rest of the people away from his stall with kind words and began taking apart his wares. When he left an hour later, I followed him. Made it about 100 meters before the fucker turned around and looked straight at me. I like to think that I've gotten good at making myself look non-suspicious. I can dress like a local, walk like a faceless member of a crowd, fake dialects, and more importantly, I don't give off any killing intent when I'm on the hunt, so I don't know what it was that alerted the guy. But as soon as he laid eyes on me, he took off running. Do I chase them or not? It's a question I've had to ask myself fairly often. When your target turns tail, a lot of the time it's just better to let them think they've escaped and come back another time. But with this guy, I got the feeling that if I let him get away, it'd be the last of him. He'd pack up to some other city, and I'd never be able to find him again. And if that happened, I'd never be able to move on to the next hunt. So I sprinted after him, followed him around a corner, and he was gone. Fuck. Only a few people lingered around the street on the other side. A couple gave me funny looks as I came sprinting around and skidded to a halt. I'd seen people pull this kind of disappearing act before. It's a pretty common trick, an invisibility charm, or climbing up, or even putting on a simple disguise. I looked around, slowly. Nothing on the rooftops, no people who looked like they could have been him in some new outfit. My infrared scanner, I didn't really care about pulling out strange technology at this point, didn't show any hidden objects. It might take... The ground next to me exploded. The blast punched me off my feet, tossed me to the ground 10 feet away. I was starting to stand up, ignoring the massive, probably broken pain in my right shoulder, when a wave of heat passed inches from my face. I heard the sound of a wall shattering behind me. I didn't turn to look. Letting yourself get distracted, that's what gets you killed. I stared straight ahead. The charm seller crouched on the ground about 20 meters in front of me. He removed his black cloak, revealing a shirtless, scarred body. The pale skin was beginning to ripple and change, bulging like hundreds of beetles were crawling around just beneath the surface. His golden eyes glowed. Around them, his face started to expand, bits of cheekbones sprouting out from his skin like horns, fanged mouth widening until he had changed entirely from human to a lined-skinned, slimy demon. My good arm was busted up. A cut on my head was spilling blood, obscuring my vision, and the creature's hand was starting to fill with a blue fire. Most of the times here, the best thing to do is run. If I did that, though, he'd catch up to me and roast me from afar in seconds. My best option here was to charge. I ran forward, screaming as I pulled my knife from its sheath. The creature didn't even bother to move. He flicked his wrist forward and a ball of flame exploded outwards. I jumped to the left, rolled, and heard another blast as it collided with another building. Before I could get to the fight, the creature had jumped. It covered the ground between us in one leap, and when it came down, it kicked a taloned foot right into my face. I felt my jaw shatter, the skin across my cheek being ripped open, and still have the scar from that till this day. See, my body can take a lot of punishment. I've been banged up worse than this before and walked away. Usually, though, there wasn't a 7-foot-tall creature dragging me to my feet and lifting me up by my neck. The thing grinned. You know, usually the people who come after me are far stronger than this, he said in a surprisingly light and musical voice. He pulled back the arm that wasn't holding me, and I saw fire beginning to form. Fortunately, my knife was still in my hand, and I'm a quick bastard. I stabbed it up right through the wrist of the hand that was gripping my neck. The creature screamed, a sound like some sort of dying antelope, and dropped me. Before he could react again, I was slashing at his ankles, and I managed to cut what felt like a tendon before he skittered back. And now, the stare down. I was crouched on the ground. He was standing out of reach. Neither of us moved from our spots. He was breathing heavily, smiling slightly, clenching and unclenching his good hand. How cute! But I'll be using your blood to fix this, he said. Grind up your skull and keep the powder in a jar. I'll sell your remains to the highest bidder who needs an aphrodisiac. I didn't say anything. I don't speak to people who I'm about to kill. I clenched my knife tighter and stood up. I was in bad shape, but he didn't look to be much better. Like it was taking all of his willpower just to stand on his fucked up leg. There wasn't much space between us. I made a half-hearted attempt to feint, but he didn't bite. At this point in a fight, tricks don't do you much. It could only be resolved in one way. And at the same instant, as if a loaded gun had gone off on a track race, we leaped towards each other. I brought my knife up, swinging it with my bad hand. He grabbed my wrist and dove his bleeding hand into my stomach and twisted his body. It brought me with him. In 1 second, I went from running forward to being flat on my back, staring at the night sky. I lost my knife in the fall. I wasn't sure where it was. He knelt down and he wrapped his hands around my throat. I could feel his palms burning my flesh. The temperature of his skin was rising, and a thin drip of boiling saliva spilled from his teeth and across my cheek. His eyes were bloodshot wild. He squeezed my throat tighter and tighter. In instant situations like this, where your best bet is to just go for the eyes. The ground that we were fighting on was loose dirt and pebbles, and I swept 2 handfuls of them up and hurled them into his face. He winced but didn't let go, but that's all that I needed, because before he could recover and get his focus back on me, I jabbed forward, thumb outstretched, and it went right into the jelly-filled socket. Now he had let go. He roared back, screaming and clutching his face. He began to desperately toss fire around him, but I was already moving. His blows were too telegraphed, and my knife was yet a few steps away from where I had landed. I grabbed it, and with a scream filled with just as much pain as triumph, I rushed at him. The blade was caught in his chest, and he froze. For a second, he just stood there, unmoving. Then, in almost slow motion, he crumpled to the ground. Didn't move, didn't breathe. I pulled the knife from his chest and wiped away the blood. Sometimes I take trophies from the people that I kill, pieces of their bodies, but I didn't bother this time. I grabbed his bag of charms from where it had fallen on the ground and began to sprint away. People had seen us fighting. The authorities were probably only a few minutes away from arriving. I had to figure out how to escape this damn city, half dead, and get home. I did, of course. It's not an interesting part of the story, though. Probably not what you were looking for. I don't know or care how you found me. What I do know is that I'm leaving for my next hunt in 5 days. Better for the rest of my drinks and food before I go, and I'll tell you anything you want. But for now, I need to go to bed. All this talking makes a man damn sleepy. Maybe if you're still here tomorrow, I'll tell you about the time that I accidentally killed the wrong dragon. As you close the book, you realize that it's more of a newspaper, or maybe the journal of a journalist. Less of a story and more of an interview. Just like the last time you were getting ready to leave the library, a librarian walks by, and a piece of paper slips on your desk. This one seems to be a poem of some sort, titled, "What Couldn't Be Done for Me." She's happy. The beads in her braids click together as she runs around the yard, smile never faltering. Her siblings bicker and cry, but she scoops them up in the blink of an eye, shushing and comforting them with a practiced precision. She's barely 6 now, skinny arms struggling to lift the blubbering babe. Her shoulders are tense with stress, tiny hands patting and caressing the baby's back, but they loosen and relax when I lift her sister into my arms. She'll rock back and forth on the balls of her feet, anxious eyes never leaving her sister's face. Can't get over the way she smiles at me, the way her eyes shine when I read to her, like I'm the only person in the world. The way she presses her body into mine when we sit together, head resting on my shoulder. It's during these moments when I feel her lips curl into a relaxed smile against my arm that I feel the familiar twinge of guilt. She lives with her grandmother, a weathered stone of a woman, all sunspots and eye bags and cigarette-stained teeth. I don't know if she's really her grandmother. Children of all ages occupy every corner of the apartment, peeking from corners, fighting for space in front of the TV, grasping crayons with sticky hands, and of course, I love them all. But there's something about her, something gut-wrenching and comforting, and beautiful and melancholy and so familiar. Perhaps it's the way that she clings to me, almost afraid to let me out of her sight, like I'm a mirage that'll disappear if she looks away for too long. And she tells me her daddy lives far away, that the last time she saw him was when he was super really little. Her rainbow Skechers kick in the air absent-mindedly, but her eyes take on a heaviness much better suited to a woman 20 years her senior. Her grandmother is much less sentimental when I ask about her mother, lips curling into a scowl as she spits out the phrase, "dope fiend." I indulge her in everything that I can, but no matter what I do, her grip is always bruising when she hugs me goodbye. Her fingers dig into my sides, invisible hooks piercing my skin. She burrows her head into my sweater, the fabric muffling her wavering voice. Goodbye. Goodbye. I love you. And always, just a little bit quieter. Please come back. And every time I swear to tell her I will, no matter what. And every time she will push a toy into my hand, insisting that I keep it. But I never do. And she'll tear up slightly, diamond black eyes, shiny and wide. But I know, when she hears me come through the door again, she'll smile.